The cold wind moved softly across Winterfell, but that morning it did not feel so cruel. It felt like something new was coming. The yard was busy, guards training, horses running, and young boys laughing as they crossed wooden swords. Among them stood two boys who looked like brothers but were never truly treated the same: Robb Stark, the true-born son of Lord Eddard Stark, and Jon Snow, the quiet bastard who always stood half a step behind. Robb laughed loudly as he pushed Jon back with a wooden blade. "You're slow today," he teased. Jon smirked and struck back harder. "Or maybe I was just waiting for you to lower your guard." Their swords clashed again, and for a moment it didn't matter who was true-born and who was not. They were just boys. From the balcony above, Lord Eddard Stark watched them carefully. Beside him stood King Robert Baratheon, larger than life, with a cup of wine already in his hand even though the sun had barely risen. "They fight well," Robert said, wiping his beard. "Strong boys, both of them." Ned nodded. "They've trained together since they could walk." Robert's eyes moved toward Jon. "The bastard fights like a wolf too." Ned's face became still. The word always cut like a hidden blade. But before he could answer, Robert let out a loud sigh. "You know, Ned," Robert said more seriously now, "when we fought the Mad King, we were brothers, not by blood, but by choice. That's what made us strong." Ned looked at his old friend. He knew where this was going. Robert continued, "Your son Robb will lead the North one day, but the realm is not safe. The Lannisters grow rich and proud. The Targaryen girl across the sea grows stronger. If war comes again, you'll need more than one wolf at your side." Ned stayed silent. Robert stepped closer. "Unite them, Ned, not just in training, in name, in honor." Ned's heart tightened. He had protected Jon all these years by keeping secrets. But secrets also built walls. Down in the yard, Robb helped Jon up after knocking him down. "One day," Robb said, smiling, "we'll fight side by side in real battles." Jon looked at him carefully. "Will we?" Robb frowned. "Of course. You're my brother." Jon did not answer. He wanted to believe it, but Winterfell always reminded him that he was something less. That evening, Ned called both boys to the great hall. The fire burned bright, and shadows danced across the stone walls. Captain Stark stood near the window, watching quietly. Robb stood proud. Jon stood unsure. Ned looked at them both. "You are growing into men," he began. "The world outside these walls is not kind. It is full of lies, betrayal, and hunger for power." Robb nodded seriously. Jon kept his eyes on the floor. Ned took a deep breath. "Robb, you are my heir. One day, Winterfell will be yours." Robb straightened. Ned turned to Jon. "Jon, you have always carried a heavy name, but you have my blood. And more than that, you have my trust." Catelyn's fingers tightened slightly, but she did not speak. King Robert stepped forward. "Listen well, boys," he boomed. "A kingdom falls when brothers turn against each other. I've seen it. I lived it." His eyes darkened for a moment, remembering Rhaegar Targaryen. "I will not see it again," Robert continued. "From this day forward, you two will stand as equals in battle and in loyalty. Robb will lead as heir, but Jon will command beside him. No shame, no distance. You are wolves of the same pack." The hall became silent. Robb's face broke into a grin. He turned to Jon. "You hear that? Together." Jon's chest felt tight. For the first time, he looked directly at Lord Stark, not as a servant's son, not as an outsider, but as something more. Ned stepped down from his seat and placed a hand on each of their shoulders. "The North remembers," he said softly, "but the North also stands united. Outside, the wind howled across the snow-covered land as if the old gods themselves were listening. That night, Robb and Jon stood on the walls of Winterfell, looking at the dark forest beyond. "Do you think Father truly means it?" Jon asked quietly. Robb looked at him. "He does, and so do I." Jon nodded slowly. Far to the south, in King's Landing, whispers of power and betrayal were already moving like snakes in the dark. The Lannisters were watching. The realm was shifting. But in the north, two young wolves were finally standing side by side, not divided by birth, but joined by choice. And if war came, it would not find them separated. It would find them united. The days after that meeting felt different in Winterfell. It was not loud or dramatic, but something had changed in the air. The guards noticed it first, then the servants. Robb Stark and Jon Snow no longer walked with that small distance between them. They trained harder, spoke more openly, and stood shoulder to shoulder like two leaders instead of a lord and his shadow. Ned Stark watched carefully. He knew unity was powerful, but he also knew it could threaten those who feared strong alliances. One cold morning, Maester Luwin arrived in the training yard with a sealed raven message. His face looked pale. "My lord," he said to Ned, who stood nearby observing the boys, "a message from King's Landing." Ned opened it slowly. His eyes moved across the words and his face grew serious. "The hand of the king has died," he said quietly. Robert Baratheon, who was still staying at Winterfell, let out a heavy breath. "Jon Arryn, dead." His voice was rough. "How?" "The message says illness," Ned replied, but his tone showed doubt. Robert crushed the wine cup in his hand. "Illness, ha. In King's Landing, illness often has a name and a face." His eyes turned toward the south, even though they were surrounded by snow. Later that day, Robert called Ned into the Great Hall privately. "I need you beside me again," Robert said. "Come to King's Landing. Be my hand." Ned hesitated. The South was a nest of politics and lies. He belonged to the North. "My place is here," Ned answered. Robert stepped closer. "And what happens if the Lannisters tighten their grip while you hide behind these walls? You think they'll leave your family untouched?" That struck deeply. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, Robb and Jon practiced with real steel this time. Their movements were sharper, more focused. Sir Roderick Cassel circled them. "Again," he shouted. Robb attacked first strong and bold. Jon moved differently calm, watching, waiting. When Robb pushed too far forward, Jon turned and disarmed him in one smooth move, sending Robb's sword into the snow. The guards watching murmured in surprise. Robb stared for a second, then laughed loudly. "Well done." Jon extended his hand and pulled him up. "You think too much like a king," Jon said quietly. "Kings rush." Robb smirked. "And you think too much like a shadow." "Shadows survive," Jon replied. Above them, Catelyn Stark observed silently. She still struggled with Jon's presence, but even she could see something undeniable. Together, they were stronger. That evening, Ned gathered his family again. "I will go south," he said calmly. "King Robert has asked it of me." Catelyn stiffened. "And what of us?" "You and the girls will remain here," Ned replied. "Robb will rule Winterfell in my absence." Robb stood straighter, trying to look like a man. "And Jon?" Robb asked suddenly. The room grew quiet. Ned looked at Jon carefully. "Jon has been offered a place at the Wall, the Night's Watch." Jon's heart dropped slightly, though he hid it well. It was an honorable path, but also a lonely one. Robb stepped forward. "He fights as well as I do. If you're going south into danger, take us both." Catelyn's eyes widened. "Robb." But Robb did not stop. "You said we stand united. If war is coming, we should learn it together." Ned felt pride and fear at the same time. Before he could answer, Robert, who had been quietly listening, spoke loudly. "The boy is right." Everyone turned to him. "If Ned Stark is to face lions, he should not walk alone," Robert said. "Take both wolves south. Let the court see the strength of the north." Catelyn looked troubled, but she could not openly argue against the king. Jon looked at Ned. "I will go where you command." Ned saw it then, the loyalty, the quiet strength. "Very well," Ned said slowly. "Robb and Jon will ride with me to King's Landing." The decision settled heavily in the room. Later that night, Jon stood alone in the Godswood. The Heart Tree watched silently as always. Robb joined him. "You should be happy," Robb said. "This is what warriors dream of." Jon gave a small smile. "I do not fear battle, I fear courts." Robb laughed softly. "Then let them fear us." Jon looked at his brother. "South is not like here. They will remind me what I am." Robb's face became firm. "You are my brother. If anyone forgets that, they answer to me." The words were simple, but they meant more than titles. Far away in King's Landing, Queen Cersei Lannister stood on a balcony overlooking the city. A servant approached carefully. "Your Grace, the king travels north. He returns soon with Eddard Stark and his sons." Cersei's eyes narrowed slightly. "Sons?" she repeated. "Yes, Your Grace, both of them." She turned slowly, golden hair shining in the sun. "Two wolves entering the lion's den," she said quietly, and in her eyes there was no welcome, only calculation. The Game of Thrones was already moving, but this time the North would not send one wolf into the trap. It would send two. The journey south began under a sky heavy with grey clouds. Winterfell slowly disappeared behind them as the large Stark party rode forward, Ned Stark at the front, King Robert beside him, and just behind them, riding close together, Robb Stark and Jon Snow. The road was long, muddy, and full of silence. The further they traveled from the north, the less the air felt like home. The trees changed. The smell changed. Even the people they passed looked at them differently. Robb noticed it first. "They stare," he muttered quietly to Jon as they rode side by side. Jon kept his eyes forward. "They always stare." But this time it was not just curiosity, it was calculation. As they crossed into the Riverlands, they were met by Lord Walder Frey's men at the Twins. The old lord himself did not come out to greet them, but his guards did not come out to greet them. But his guards did. Thin smiles, sharp eyes. One of the Frey knights rode closer to Robb. "The young wolf," he said with a polite bow. "Here to Winterfell." Robb nodded respectfully. The knight's eyes then shifted to Jon. "And this is..." Before Jon could answer, Robb spoke calmly. "My brother." The knight paused slightly. "Ah, just one word, but heavy." Jon said nothing. He had heard that tone before. It was the sound of judgment, dressed as politeness. They crossed the Twins without trouble, but the message was clear: the South would not see Jon as equal. Not easily. Days later, King's Landing finally appeared on the horizon. It was nothing like Winterfell. Where Winterfell stood strong and quiet, King's Landing was loud, crowded, and alive in a dangerous way. The Red Keep rose above the city like a red claw gripping the hill. Robert sighed deeply. "Home," he said, though it did not sound warm. As they entered the city gates, people gathered to watch. Some cheered for the king. Others whispered. Two young northern men riding beside the Warden of the North caught attention quickly. Inside the Red Keep, Queen Cersei Lannister waited with a calm face and sharp green eyes. Beside her stood her brother, Sir Jaime Lannister, shining in white armor. When the Starks entered the hall, the tension could almost be touched. "Lord Stark," Cersei said smoothly, "welcome to King's Landing." Ned bowed slightly. Her gaze moved to Robb first. "You must be the young heir." Robb bowed respectfully. "Your Grace." Then her eyes shifted to Jon. "And you?" Jon met her gaze without lowering his head. Jon Snow. A small smile touched her lips. Snow, how fitting. Jaime chuckled quietly. Robb stepped slightly closer to Jon, not aggressive but protective. Cersei noticed. How interesting, she said softly. The North brings two wolves instead of one. That is because wolves hunt in packs, Robert interrupted loudly, already drinking again. The court laughed nervously, but Cersei's smile did not reach her eyes. Later that evening, Robb and Jon walked through the Red Keep's training yard. Knights practiced in shining armor, far more polished than anything in Winterfell. A tall, handsome knight approached them, Ser Loras Tyrell. "You're far from home," Loras said lightly. Robb smiled politely. "The south is warmer." Loras looked at Jon. "And does the bastard enjoy court life?" Before Jon could respond, Robb stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "Careful, sir. In the north, we value honor." Loras raised an eyebrow but smiled. "Of course." Jon placed a hand gently on Robb's arm. "It is fine." But it was not fine. That night, Ned met privately with Petyr Baelish Littlefinger. The man smiled too easily. "The Lannisters grow bold," Littlefinger whispered. "Jon Arryn was asking questions before he died. Dangerous questions." "About what?" Ned asked. "About the royal children." Meanwhile, in their chambers, Robb paced the room. "They mock you openly," Robb said angrily, "and smile while doing it." Jon sat near the window, looking at the city lights below. "Let them. You are as strong as any of them." Jon looked at him quietly. "Strength in King's Landing is not measured by sword skill." Robb stopped pacing. "Then we learn their game too." Jon studied his brother's face. There was fire there, northern fire. A soft knock came at the door. It was Arya Stark. "You two should not walk alone here," she whispered. "I heard servants talking. The Queen does not trust us." Robb exchanged a glance with Jon. Good, Jon thought. Trust in this city was weakness. Outside, in the shadows of the Red Keep, Varys the Spider watched quietly from a balcony. Two wolves, he thought. If they remain united, they will be dangerous. And in the chambers of the Queen, Cersei spoke softly to Jaime. "The Stark boys are closer than expected." Jaime shrugged. "Boys break." Cersei's eyes hardened. "Then we will make sure they do." But she did not yet understand something important. These were not two boys walking into a trap alone. They were brothers who had chosen each other. And that choice was stronger than blood. The game had begun. The days in King's Landing grew heavier, like the air before a storm. Ned Stark had taken his place as Hand of the King, sitting beneath the Iron Throne, listening to complaints, lies, and half-truths. But unlike in the original Path of Fate, he was not alone. Robb stood often at his right, watching carefully. Jon stood at his left, silent but sharp-eyed, noticing what others missed. And people noticed them. "They move like soldiers," one court lord whispered. "No," another replied quietly, "they move like wolves." One afternoon, a tournament was announced in honor of Ned's appointment. The Hand's Tourney. Knights from across the realm gathered to show strength and loyalty. But under the bright banners and loud cheers, politics flowed darker than wine. Robb was eager. "Let me ride," he said to Ned. "Let the South see the North's strength." Ned hesitated. "This is not a northern battlefield." Jon stepped forward calmly. "That is why we should ride." Ned looked between them. He saw courage, but also something smarter. Unity. "A message." "Very well," Ned said at last. "But you ride not for glory. You ride for the North." The day of the tourney arrived loud and golden. Crowds filled the stands. Queen Cersei sat high beside King Robert. Jaime Lannister stood in white armor, shining like a blade. Robb Stark rode out first, wearing grey armor marked with the direwolf. The southern crowd murmured. He was young but confident. His opponent was a seasoned knight from the Reach. The horn sounded. The horses charged. Their lances struck hard, but Robb held firm. The southern knight fell from his horse into the dirt. The crowd gasped. Robb removed his helmet, raising it slightly in respect. Some cheered. Others frowned. Then came Jon's turn. He wore no bright, sigil-only simple dark armor. The announcer's voice rang out, "Jon Snow of the North." A few laughs echoed lightly at the name. His opponent was stronger, older, and clearly amused. "Try not to fall too hard, Snow," the knight mocked. Jon said nothing. The charge came fast. The first clash cracked like thunder, but both riders stayed mounted. The second charge came even harder. This time Jon shifted slightly at the last second. His lance struck true. The knight was thrown violently into the dust. Silence fell over the arena. Jon removed his helmet slowly. His dark hair fell across his forehead. His expression remained calm. Robb rode beside him, lifting his sword high, two northern wolves standing together in the southern sun. In the royal box, Cersei's jaw tightened slightly. Robert, already drunk, roared with laughter. "Did you see that? Huh, Stark blood runs strong." Jaime Lannister watched quietly, his smile thinner now. Later that evening, as celebrations filled the halls, something darker moved in the shadows. Ned sat alone in the Hand's chamber when Littlefinger arrived once again. "You are getting close to something dangerous," Littlefinger whispered. Jon Arryn discovered the truth about the royal children. Ned's eyes sharpened. "Speak clearly. They are not Robert's," Littlefinger said softly. The words hit like cold steel. Meanwhile, in the feast hall, Robb and Jon stood near the edges, observing rather than drinking. "Something is wrong," Robb muttered. Jon nodded slightly. "The Queen watches us too closely." As if summoned by the thought, Prince Joffrey approached, golden-haired and arrogant. "You ride well for Northerners," Joffrey said with a thin smile. "Though tournaments are games, real war is different." Robb met his gaze evenly. "We are prepared for both." Joffrey's eyes shifted to Jon. "And you? Do bastards dream of knighthood too?" The insult was sharp and public. The hall grew quiet. Robb stepped forward instantly. "You will speak with respect." Joffrey's hand moved to his sword slightly. Jon placed a hand on Robb's arm, not to hold him back, but to steady him. "I do not dream of titles," Jon said calmly, "only of loyalty." Joffrey sneered. "Loyalty to whom?" Jon's eyes did not move. "To my family." The tension felt like it might explode. Then Robert's loud voice broke through the hall. "Enough! This is a feast, not a battlefield." But seeds had been planted. That night, Ned gathered Robb and Jon privately. "There is a truth I may soon have to face," Ned said quietly. "If it comes to light, it will anger the Queen deeply." Robb frowned. "Then we stand ready." Jon looked at his father carefully. "What truth?" Ned hesitated. "If the king's children are not his blood, the throne itself is built on a lie." Silence filled the room. Robb's breath slowed. "If that is true, war will follow." Jon's eyes darkened slightly. "Then the lions will strike first." Far above them, in her chamber, Cersei Lannister stared out into the night. "They grow bold," she said to Jaime. Jaime leaned against the wall. "Then it is time." Cersei's voice was cold. "Yes," she whispered, "before the wolves become a pack too strong to break." And in the darkness of King's Landing, plans began to move. The game was no longer slow. It was about to turn deadly. The tension in King's Landing no longer hid behind smiles. It walked openly through the halls, whispered in corners, and followed the Stark boys wherever they went. Ned had confirmed the truth. After speaking to Gendry, the blacksmith's apprentice with unmistakable Baratheon features, and after reading the old book of lineages, there was no doubt left. Robert's supposed children had golden hair, not the black of House Baratheon. The seed was strong, except in the royal line. One evening, Ned gathered Robb and Jon in his chamber. The fire burned low, casting long shadows. "It is true," Ned said quietly. "Joffrey is not Robert's son." Robb felt anger rise instantly. "Then he has no claim." Jon's face was calmer, but his mind was moving fast. "If the truth spreads, the Queen will not wait. She will strike," Robb said. Ned nodded. "Which is why we must move carefully, but careful plans rarely survive reckless kings." The next morning, Robert announced a hunting trip outside the city. He was eager, restless, blind to the storm building around him. "Come, Ned," Robert laughed. "We'll hunt like old times." Ned wanted to refuse, but refusing the king openly would raise suspicion. Robb insisted on riding with them. Jon too. "No," Ned said firmly. "One of you must remain here." Robb and Jon looked at each other. "I'll stay," Jon said calmly. "Robb should ride beside you." Robb frowned. "We said we stand together." "We do," Jon replied quietly, "but someone must watch the lions." Ned studied Jon carefully. He saw something growing in the boy, something sharp and steady. "Very well," Ned said. "Jon stays." As the hunting party rode out, Cersei stood on a balcony, watching them disappear beyond the gates. Her expression was unreadable. That night, chaos arrived. A rider burst into the Red Keep at full speed. "The king!" he shouted. "The king!" he shouted. "The king is wounded!" The court exploded into noise. Jon moved immediately. He reached the gates just as Robert's body was carried inside bloody, torn by a boar. Robb rode beside the stretcher, his face pale but controlled. Robert was still alive, but barely. Cersei rushed forward, playing the grieving queen. "Clear the hall," she commanded. Jon watched her closely. This was no accident. In the king's chamber, Robert lay sweating and dying. Ned stood beside him. "Gods, it was a strong beast," Robert whispered weakly. Ned held his hand. "Rest." Robert coughed painfully. "The boy, Joffrey." Ned leaned closer. "He is not my son," Robert muttered. "I see it now, too late." His breathing grew shallow. "Make it right, Ned," he whispered. "Protect the realm." And then the king of the Seven Kingdoms was gone. Silence filled the chamber. But outside, movement had already begun. Cersei wasted no time. Within hours, the Lannister guards surrounded key entrances of the castle. The City Watch gold cloaks were quietly repositioned. Jon noticed. He moved quickly to Robb. "They are locking down the gates," Jon said quietly. Robb's jaw tightened. "They move fast." "They planned this," Jon replied. Ned soon summoned them. "I have written a letter," Ned said, holding the sealed paper. "It names Stannis Baratheon as rightful heir." Robb's eyes widened. "Then we must present it to the council immediately." Jon shook his head slightly. "The council may already belong to the Queen." Ned looked at him carefully. "You believe they would betray the law?" Jon met his father's gaze. "This city does not worship law. It worships power." Before they could act further, the doors burst open. Littlefinger entered, with armed gold cloaks behind him. "I warned you about trust," Littlefinger said softly. Ned reached for his sword, but guards surrounded him instantly. Robb stepped forward, hand on his blade. Jon moved beside him. Cersei entered calmly, dressed in black. "You move too slowly, Lord Stark," she said coldly. Ned stood tall. "The throne belongs to Stannis." Cersei smiled thinly. "The throne belongs to those who take it." The gold cloaks tightened their grip. But this time, something was different. Robb did not stand frozen. Jon did not hesitate. "Now," Jon whispered. In one sharp movement, Robb's sword flashed free. Jon moved like shadow beside him. Two northern wolves unleashed in the lion's den. Steel rang loudly in the chamber. Chaos exploded. Guards fell back under their sudden attack. Robb fought with bold strength, pushing forward aggressively. Jon moved with precise control, striking fast and clean. Ned stared in shock but also pride. Littlefinger stepped backward quickly. Cersei's face hardened. "Seize them!" she screamed, but it was too late for a clean capture. The Starks had not walked blindly into the trap this time. They were ready. And as swords clashed beneath the banners of the Red Keep, one truth became clear. This would not end with quiet imprisonment. This would become war. Steel clashed inside the council chamber, echoing like thunder against the stone walls. The gold cloaks had expected fear and surrender. Instead, they faced fury. Robb fought like a storm. His blade moved wide and strong, forcing two guards back at once. Jon stayed close to Ned, cutting down any man who stepped too near. He did not waste movement. Every strike had purpose. "Out!" Robb shouted. "We break toward the yard." Ned understood instantly. Staying trapped inside meant death. Jon grabbed a fallen shield and shoved it into Ned's arm. "Stay behind us." For a brief moment, father and son stood in a triangle formation, united. They pushed forward. Littlefinger had already slipped away like a rat into shadows. Cersei retreated behind her guards, fury burning in her eyes. "Kill them!" she screamed. But killing Starks inside the Red Keep was not simple. The noise spread quickly. Northern guards, who had been stationed nearby, rushed toward the chamber. Steel met steel in the corridors. The fight was no longer silent. It was open. Outside in the yard, chaos was growing. Some of the City Watch hesitated. They were loyal to gold, not lions. Robb cut through the doorway first, Jon close behind. Ned protected between them. Once outside, Robb turned toward the nearest northern captain. "Form up!" Robb commanded loudly. To the hand, the Stark men rallied fast. Jon scanned the walls. Lannister archers were moving into position above. "Shields!" Jon yelled. Arrows rained down. One struck a Stark guard beside Jon, dropping him instantly. Jon's jaw tightened, but he did not slow. Ned grabbed Robb's arm. "We must reach the stables." They pushed across the yard under cover of shields and smoke. Someone had knocked over a torch. Fire licked at wooden carts nearby. This was no small arrest attempt anymore. This was open conflict inside the capital. From a balcony above, Joffrey watched with excitement. "Let me go down," he demanded. Jaime Lannister stood beside him, calm but calculating. "Not yet." Jaime's eyes followed Jon carefully. The bastard fights well, he thought. In the chaos, Robb reached the stables first. He cut down a guard trying to block the door. "Horses," he shouted. Jon helped Ned mount quickly. "We cannot hold the castle," Ned said urgently. "We must leave the city." Robb nodded. "The northern men at the gates may already be dead," Jon finished quietly. A loud horn echoed from the outer walls. Jon froze slightly. That was not a Lannister signal. Another horn answered from outside the city. Robb looked at him. "That's not ours." Jon's eyes sharpened. "No, but it's not theirs either." Moments later, a soldier burst into the yard shouting Baratheon banners at the northern gate. Stannis. He had come faster than expected. Cersei had planned to move quickly after Robert's death, but she had underestimated how quickly word could travel. Stannis Baratheon's fleet had arrived in Blackwater Bay during the night, and his forces were now pressing against the city gates. Inside the Red Keep, panic shifted direction. Jaime turned sharply. "They're early." Cersei's face paled for just a second. "How many?" "Enough." In the stable yard, Robb looked at Ned. "This is our chance." Ned hesitated only briefly. If Stannis took the city while they were trapped inside, they could be caught between both sides. Jon made the decision clear. "We ride North Gate. If Stannis breaks through, we stand beside him. If not, we cut our way out." Ned studied both boys. They were no longer boys. "Ride," Ned ordered. They burst from the stable yard with a group of Stark guards, cutting through confused Lannister soldiers. The city streets were chaos, people screaming, doors slamming shut. Smoke rose from near the gates. As they approached, they saw it clearly, Baratheon banners flying outside the walls, soldiers battering the gates, ships firing from the river. The Lannisters were trapped between defense and betrayal. Suddenly, a white-armored figure stepped into the street ahead. Jaime Lannister. He removed his helmet slowly. "Well," Jaime said lightly, though tension edged his voice, "the wolves try to escape." Robb did not hesitate. He rode forward, sword ready. Jon dismounted quietly. "Together," Robb said. Jaime smiled faintly. "Good." The duel began fast. Jaime was faster than most men alive. His blade flashed like silver lightning. Robb met him head-on, strength against skill. Jon circled, waiting for an opening. Jaime pushed Robb back slightly, testing him. "You're strong," Jaime said, "but strength alone." Jon struck suddenly from the side. Jaime twisted just in time, steel clashing with steel. Now he faced two. For the first time, Jaime's smile faded fully. They moved like they had trained their entire lives together. Robb pressured hard. Jon cut sharp and precise. Jaime defended beautifully, but even he could not attack freely against two united fighters. A distant explosion shook the ground. The northern gate cracked. Baratheon soldiers poured through. Jaime stepped back, reassessing. This fight was no longer worth finishing. He disengaged quickly, retreating toward the Red Keep. "This isn't over," he called back calmly. Robb watched him go, breathing hard. Jon looked toward the broken gate where Stannis' forces were entering. The city was falling, but the real war was just beginning. And for the first time, the North and the rightful heir stood on the same side, because two wolves had refused to stand apart. The gates of King's Landing had fallen. Baratheon soldiers poured into the city like a dark tide, their banners snapping in the smoky air. The Golden Lions were being pushed back street by street. Screams echoed between stone buildings, and the smell of fire and blood mixed under the hot southern sun. Robb wiped sweat from his face, breathing hard. "It's happening too fast." Jon's eyes stayed sharp, scanning every rooftop and alley. "Fast is good. Fast means the Queen has less time to plan." Ned rode up beside them. "We find Stannis. If he takes the throne, we stand as witnesses to the truth." They moved carefully through the chaos until they reached the main square before the Red Keep. There, beneath the torn Lannister banners, stood Stannis Baratheon, cold, rigid, armored in dark steel. He looked nothing like Robert. Where Robert had been loud and warm, Stannis was hard stone. When he saw Ned Stark, he gave a single nod. "You came," Stannis said flatly. "I came for the realm," Ned answered. Stannis' eyes shifted to Robb and Jon. "Your sons." "My heirs in loyalty," Ned replied carefully. Stannis studied them. "Good. I will need men who understand loyalty." Behind them, Baratheon soldiers forced open the gates of the Red Keep. The final stand would happen inside. But Cersei Lannister was not surrendering quietly. Inside the throne room, she stood dressed in red and gold, Joffrey beside her. The Iron Throne rose behind them like a blade forest. Jaime entered quickly. "The gates are broken," he said. "Stannis is here." Cersei's face was pale but controlled. "And the Stark boys?" "Alive," Jaime answered, "and dangerous." Joffrey stepped forward angrily. "Let me fight them." Cersei grabbed his arm sharply. "You will do nothing." Her mind was racing. She had planned to control the throne through fear and speed, but she had not expected unity between the Starks and Stannis so quickly. "Prepare the wildfire," she whispered to a nearby servant. Jaime's eyes narrowed. "Cersei, if I cannot have the throne," she said coldly, "no one will." Outside, Ned, Robb, Jon, and Stannis approached the Red Keep doors. "Once we enter, there is no turning back," Stannis said. Robb looked at Jon. Jon gave a small nod. They stepped inside. The halls were half abandoned. Some Lannister guards fought desperately. Others fled. When they reached the throne room doors, they were already slightly open. Inside, Cersei stood tall before the throne. "So," she said softly, "the wolves bring a new king." Stannis stepped forward. "Your children are not Robert's. You know this." Cersei smiled faintly. "And yet my son sits the throne." Joffrey sat above them, trying to look brave, but fear flickered in his eyes when he saw Robb and Jon standing united. Ned moved forward. "It does not have to end in fire, Cersei." Her eyes flashed at the word. "You think I would kneel?" she asked quietly. Behind her, servants moved nervously. Jon noticed the smell first. Oil. His eyes widened slightly. "Robb," he whispered. Robb smelled it too. Wildfire. Jon stepped forward suddenly. "She plans to burn the city." Stannis's face darkened. "Seize her." Chaos erupted again. Jaime moved fast, blocking the path toward Cersei. His blade met Robb's in a violent clash. Jon sprinted toward the side doors where the servants were running. One of them carried a torch. Jon tackled him to the ground just as the man tried to light a hidden fuse along the wall. The torch fell, sparks flying dangerously close to green liquid seeping between stones. Jon crushed the flame under his boot. Across the hall, Robb and Jaime fought fiercely. Jaime was skilled, but Robb was stronger than before, driven by purpose, not pride. Stannis' soldiers overwhelmed the remaining guards. Cersei realized it was over. For the first time, true fear crossed her face. Jaime saw it too. He disengaged suddenly, backing toward her. "It's done," he muttered quietly. Stannis climbed the steps toward the throne. Joffrey stood frozen. "You are no king," Stannis said coldly. Guard seized the boy. Cersei did not scream. She only stared at Ned. "You think this will save your family?" she asked softly. "The game never ends." Ned held her gaze calmly. "It ends when honor stands together." Jon walked back to Robb's side. The throne room was secured. The wildfire plot stopped. The city saved from burning. Stannis Baratheon turned to Ned. "You have done your duty." Ned bowed slightly. "As have my sons." Stannis looked at Robb and Jon carefully. "Unity," he said quietly. "Rare in this world." Robb stood tall. Jon said nothing but inside. Something had shifted. They had faced the lion's den and survived, not because of titles, but because they stood together. Outside, the city slowly grew quieter. The war for the throne had turned, but far in the north, darker winds were still rising beyond the wall, and unity would soon be tested in ways even greater than politics. Because while kings fought for crowns, something ancient was waking in the cold. King's Landing had changed rulers, but peace did not follow easily. Stannis Baratheon now sat upon the Iron Throne, stiff and silent, as if the blades beneath him could cut at any moment. The Lannister banners were torn down. Cersei and Joffrey were locked away under heavy guard. Jaime Lannister had surrendered his sword to prevent further bloodshed, though his eyes still carried quiet fire. But while the South adjusted to a new king, a raven arrived from the north. Its message was short. The dead walk beyond the wall. Ned read it twice. Robb and Jon stood before him in the chamber of the hand. "The Night's Watch calls for aid," Ned said quietly. "They speak of white shadows, of villages found frozen and empty." Jon's face changed. The wall had always felt close to him, even from afar. Robb folded his arms. "Stories to scare children." Ned shook his head slowly. "The Watch does not frighten easily." Stannis entered the chamber without ceremony. "I have read the same letter," he said. "If this threat is real, it threatens the whole realm, not just the north." Jon stepped forward. "Then we must ride north. Now." Stannis studied him carefully. "You speak boldly for one without title, Jon." met his gaze. The cold does not care about titles. A small silence followed. Ned placed a hand on Jon's shoulder. "My sons will return north," Ned said firmly. "Winter is coming. The north must stand ready." Stannis nodded once. "I will send men and supplies, but understand this, if this threat proves false." "It won't," Jon said quietly. Days later, Robb and Jon rode north with Stark banners flying once more. This time, they did not ride as boys leaving home. They rode as warriors who had faced the lion and survived. As they crossed back into the colder lands, the air felt sharper, cleaner, more honest. Robb looked at Jon while riding through the neck. "You feel it too?" Robb asked. Jon nodded. "Yes." Jon nodded. "Yes." The South had been dangerous with whispers and lies. The North felt dangerous in a different way, open and ancient. When they finally reached Winterfell, the people gathered in the yard to welcome them. Word of King's Landing had already spread. The North spoke proudly of how the Stark boys had fought side by side. Catelyn watched them carefully. For the first time, when she looked at Jon, there was something different in her eyes. Not warmth, but respect. There was little time for rest. Another raven came from Castle Black. The dead attacked in the night. We lost men. Jon did not hesitate. "I ride to the wall," he said. Robb stepped forward immediately. "Then I ride with you." Jon looked at him. "This is different." Robb smiled slightly. "We stand united. Remember." So they rode again north of Winterfell, past the last villages, until the wall rose before them like a frozen mountain touching the sky. Castle Black was tense when they arrived. Lord Commander Mormont greeted them grimly. "You came quickly." Jon looked into the old man's tired eyes. "Tell me." Mormont's voice was low. "We burned the bodies. They rose again." Robb's expression hardened. That night they stood atop the wall, staring into endless darkness beyond. The wind howled like something alive. Jon spoke softly. "All the fighting for thrones, and this waits in the cold." Robb rested his hands on the icy stone. "Then the realm is lucky we are not divided." Below them a sudden horn blast echoed once, then twice, then 3 times. 3 blasts. Mormont's face went pale. "White walkers," he whispered. From the darkness beyond the wall, shapes began to move. Not men, not animals, something else. An army of the dead, silent and endless, emerging from snow and shadow. Robb's hand tightened on his sword. Jon's breath slowed. Jon's breath slowed. Fear tried to rise, but something stronger stood in its place. Unity. They turned to the men behind them. "Hold the line," Robb commanded. Jon stepped beside him. "No one fights alone," Jon added firmly. Torches were lit, arrows prepared, steel drawn. The first wave struck the wall's gate with unnatural strength. But this time, the North was ready, because Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon had chosen unity before pride, because Robb and Jon had chosen brotherhood before jealousy, because wolves hunting together are stronger than any lone lion. As the dead clawed at the gates and icy winds screamed across the wall, 2 brothers stood side by side at the edge of the world, not divided by name, not separated by birth, but united by juice. And in that unity, the fate of Westeros would be decided.